Hello, welcome to Weather Lab 14, Climate Controls, and we're going to be looking at the information to work climatographs in this lab. Before we get started, please take a moment to look at the first page of your lab and really take time to look at these key terms that you're going to be running into. And they nicely bullet pointed them down here below, and I don't need to read these out loud. You just take a moment, read through. That way when you're reading the questions and they're asking for anything like daily average, temperatures or your normal precipitation ranges, you know what's being asked of you. And so I'm going to flip pages and we'll start looking at actual climatograph information. So on the next page of your lab, you're going to be looking at different forms of data. They will be shown in an image called a climatograph. So this right here is a climatograph. This is another climatograph. So we're going to be looking at climatographs. And each climatograph lets you read information on different parameters. So for example, in the climatograph of Washington, D.C., they tell me where the location is, Washington, D.C. They tell me its latitude and longitude. They give me the elevation based on sea level in meters with the little m on the end. They give me the average yearly temperature. So this is the average over the course of the year. So average yearly temperature. And they give me the average annual precipitation. So this is the average amount of precipitation annually for the year. On this side of the climatograph, they give me the temperatures. There's a temperature range. And on this side, they give me a set of numbers in centimeters. So I've got temperatures on this side, and I have centimeters on this side, and that's so that I can read different points of information. So that brings me to the graph itself. This dotted line right here is for reading temperature. So the line is for reading temperature. The bars at the bottom, the bars at the base, are for reading precipitation level. So you're going to read precipitation, and line graph, you're going to read temperature. The bottom axis of my climatograph gives me months of the year. So we're starting with January and you're going to go all the way to December. Therefore, you can glean a whole bunch of information based on either monthly data, yearly data, or a set of average precipitation or your average temperatures per month, or you can give me the whole year. So there's a lot of information I can take. So for example, question 1 asks you what is the average annual temperature. It's a pretty easy question, and you can just look it up from the top, and you look right here and you see that the average annual temperature is 14 degrees Celsius. The next question's a bit tricky. They ask you for the annual temperature range. Now the range of temperature is how cold is cold, how hot is hot, and you subtract. So this is how much the range of temperature will be. So I'm going to look for the lowest numbers on my graph, which is about here, which I'd say is maybe 2 degrees Celsius. And then up here is my high temperature, which is maybe 26 degrees Celsius, because it's a little bit above 25. And once again, notice that I'm reading it off of this side for my temperatures. So average annual temperature range will be a range between about 2 degrees to 26 degrees. So I'm going to take 26, since that's my bigger number, and I'm going to subtract it by 2, and I will get a set of 24 degrees. So that's my range in temperature. And the range is important because even though the average is 14, if you note this image right here, the average annual temperature range is not that great. So even though the average overall over the course of the entire year might be something that's like 25 degrees Celsius, then, with the range of only being 3 degrees difference, you know that it stays about the same all year round. The next part is your annual precipitation. This is the total amount of precipitation over the course of a year, and it's the average total amount of precipitation, and that's 103.6. So 103.6. is my answer there. All right, so now we're going to look at question 2. Does Washington, D.C. have a marked wet season? Well, this is now going to look at the bar graph part. So now I'm going to look at the bar graph down below. And if I have a marked wet season, I will see a very distinctive set of months with a whole bunch of rain. And if I look, I don't really see that. Everybody's about the same, working at about maybe 7 centimeters up to about 11 or 12 centimeters, which is very different in contrast to this figure right next to us of 14.2, where we can see almost no rain here and then a very big wet season right in here, right? So there's a very big difference in how I would say. So my answer to this would be no. There's an average amount of rain of about maybe 7 centimeters to 12 centimeters all year. Once again, you write nice and neat and small. I'm using a big fat stylus with a funky end. So then question 3 asks, what other information can I glean from the climatograph? Well, I can tell you what type of seasons there are, whether there's a wet or dry season, or if there's a cold and warm season. And in this case, there's a cold season, right? And a warm season. And it's very distinctively different, so I can tell you that Washington, D.C. has 4 seasons. Right? It has 4 seasons. I can tell you the average amount of precipitation. I can tell you what time of year is the warm time of year, right? So that's June, July, August. What time of year are the cold parts of the year? December, January, February. So there's a lot of information that I can glean from a climatograph. Pick a few, like 2 or 3, and write them down in question 3. So that brings me to the rest of this lab. Now that I've shown you how to read a climatograph, you should be able to do the same thing. All of the questions that you are seeing in the entire lab are the same sort of thing. They're asking you something about the place, and you are writing down that information. And so you should be able to glean all that information for the rest of this lab. You really don't need more video walkthrough or assistance. You're just being literal. So look it up from the graph, read it from the correct side of the graph, and write down that information. The other nice thing about the lab is the beginning of each section prompts you on what they're concentrating on. So one of them will be a section on wet and dry season. Another one will be maritime versus continental. So stuff on the interior, stuff that's not on the interior of land but against the water, right? So they're there. Another one is about latitudes. So you're going to compare something in the high latitudes at 90, middle latitudes in the 30-60 range, and something at the low latitudes around the equator, 0. So you're going to compare latitudes. Another section will be comparing things like mountainous or highland climates, so something with very high elevations. And you're just going to read the climatographs, be incredibly literal on your information when you're answering your questions. Tell me the numbers, exactly what you're seeing. Don't make things up or write erroneous sentences that don't make sense. Be exact. Otherwise than that, this is a fairly straightforward lab, and you're going to be practicing reading different climatographs to answer your questions. Best of luck getting it done, and when you complete the actual lab part in the book, you will be doing the digital section. So please sign on to your Blackboard and go into the sections needed to link over to the My Meteorology labs. You're going to do climate controls, questions 22 through 29, and then you're going to link over to the My Meteorology African Intertropical Convergence Zone, and you will do questions 30 through 32. So this is a big lab. There are a lot of questions, even though they're fairly easy to answer. You will be doing a lot of questions, so it's worth a lot of points as well. So it's an easy, lots of points-based lab. And once again, as always, if you have any questions, please contact me. Best of luck. Bye.